Hi, good evening. My name is Kasim Cunningham. I am enrolled in ERHS 450, or Introduction to Radiation Biology. A little bit about myself. I've been in the Navy for about 8.5 years um, as a radiation technician. So our jobs are more on the technician side. We handle basically, we support the radiation safety officer, radiation health officer in their role in maintaining ALARA and monitoring the health effects from radiation exposure. So I've been doing that for about 8.5 years with the intention of elevating to a radiation safety officer position in the near future once I finish my degree here at Colorado State University. Um, but today I want to talk about Operation Anaconda and some radiation exposure at Tora Bora, Afghanistan in 2002. So, so this is some background information. Purpose of Operation Anaconda, first of all, this happened in March of 2002. This only occurred for about I think 3 weeks. And the purpose was to locate, encircle, and destroy remaining Al Qaeda and Taliban forces that had taken refuge in the area. But that's just a little background on my topic here. And it was quite successful. The outcome, we were able to disrupt Al Qaeda and Taliban operations in eastern Afghanistan. To note in the next slide, that area in the Middle East is very difficult to conduct military operations on the ground due to the terrain. But glad to see that we were able to be successful in the outcome. And this is the map of that area. So now we're getting to the interesting stuff. So, what is ionizing radiation? So, in a condensed version, ionizing radiation is a process where electrons are stripped from their atoms, creating ions, and these ions go on to, when it comes to humans or tissue, goes on to conduct damage to tissue, cells, and DNA. And then some of the notable ionizing radiation include alpha particles, betas, gammas, X-rays, and neutrons. Now, we talked about this in the first weeks of the class. There's something of note that I've always learned is means of attenuation. So basically, how do we protect ourselves from these types of radiations that if you work in the health physics side of this field, nuclear physics, you most likely know about the means of attenuations. So from what I've always been told, alpha particles are essentially a helium nucleus. So you have your two protons, two electrons, pretty large particles, right? And because of their large size and low energies, they don't do well in penetrating most objects. So means of attenuation for an alpha particle will be like a piece of paper. Beta particles, again, they're small in size, they're fast, small in size, not a lot of energy, and means of attenuation can be clothing. Gamma rays, no, not a particle. It's just simply energy. Means of attenuation is similar to that of X-rays. Lead, very popular. That's why when you get an X-ray, you might put on a lead apron. Very, very effective against gammas and X-rays. And then, excuse me. And then finally, neutrons. Neutrons, there are the two kinds. I'm not going to get too deep into the nuclear physics side of things, but there's slow neutrons and your fast neutrons. And the ones that we are concerned about the most are the fast neutrons. These are high energy particles that can move, they can go in one end of your body, out the other fast, right? So we really care about neutrons. So on my last assignment, I was attached to a nuclear aircraft carrier, and the setup for a PWR, or pressurized water reactor. So you have your reactor, and then you have primary coolant surrounding, or pretty much encasing, the reactor where all this stuff happens. And that's its primary purpose is, one, to cool the reactor, but also to slow down those neutrons that are a result of spontaneous fission. So these are things that they just happen because of the process in which they're doing. So that's the goal of that water there, is to slow down those fast neutrons that can obviously increase radiation exposure for the workers that are working around it. And yeah, to the credit of the naval nuclear propulsion program, they their exposure is very, very low, considering what it could be with what they work with. So they do a great job in keeping things alara, and managing the radiation, or limiting the radiation exposure of their personnel by putting those means of attenuations in place for those fast neutrons. So that's great for them. Now, the biological effects of radiation exposure. So we call these, I'm used to these being called the deterministic effects. There's also the stochastic effects, which are those cancer-causing effects that we can't really put a number to, but we're going to talk about the deterministic effects. These are effects that we have a threshold for, so we know there's a relationship between the dose you get and the effects as a result of what you get. And we have seen this time and time again through numerous events throughout history, Chernobyl, Fukushima, and some other notable events, some accidents that happened in our history. So these effects usually happen typically they happen over a long period of time, but there are some instances where they happen on the spot, like Chernobyl. I don't know if you've ever seen that document, the film, but this firefighter scene where the guy is standing next, he's like fighting a fire on a pile of rubble, and his skin starts to glow red, right? So I recommend to watch it if you haven't. It's a very good film. It's a series, more like it. I think it's on Hulu still. But so you see some of the common effects: skin reddening, burn. I meant to put hair loss at the very bottom there, sterility at high doses, cataract formation, and there's a ton of others. I think at higher doses, for a longer period of time, you have a condition that you can develop called profound neutropenia, which is a dangerously low count in the white blood cell components. There's 5 of them. You have the neutrophils, the leukocytes, eosinophils, basophils, and then there's another one I can't think of off the top of my head. But so that neutropenia is a prompt decrease in a dangerously low number of white blood cell components that are responsible for the defense of your immune system. So these effects, though they happen over a long period of time, there are instances where they can happen quickly, and you'll see these effects and as fast as long as a few hours. So definitely want to prevent that from happening. And knowledge is the way to be informed and keep yourself safe from the deterministic effects of radiation. Okay, so how this relates to Aurora. So in my description here, to summarize, after the operation ended, they and this team is from the National Institute of Health. They conducted some studies in the surrounding areas. They collected urine samples from the civilians in the area, urine samples, and they based it off of some things. So the onset of symptoms, physical presence, right, and clinical manifestations. So they took samples. They analyzed for concentration of uranium isotopes, because we're in the next slide, we're going to talk about why uranium. So they looked for uranium 234, 235, 236, and 238. And they found significant concentrations of uranium in all subjects, and even some in non-exposed populations. So obviously, when dealing with radioactive substances, there's a term called, I can't think of it at the moment. It's basically, and this happened at, I believe it was Hiroshima and Nagasaki. They detonate the explosive at altitude, and the wind will carry it. And so it might have not happened in that area, but the wind will carry the radioactive plume to other areas, exposing people who were they weren't in the vicinity of the exposure. So they also got exposed as well, unintentionally, unfortunately. So depleted uranium. This is from the previous slide. So we're talking about the depleted uranium. Basically, it's just left over from the uranium decay process. Well, I'm sorry, not decay process, but once whatever the purpose of the uranium was used for, once that's done, you have depleted uranium left over. And most times it's used for nuclear fuel. One thing to note is it's less radioactive than natural uranium, and it mostly composes of uranium-238. So depleted uranium is basically, it's a certain percentage, and I believe it's if a substance has less than 0.7% of uranium, it is considered depleted, and so that's obviously, it doesn't have any use for whatever you use it for, mainly to create energy to be used in a reactor or a power plant, or whatever the case is. It has no use. It's depleted, so they call it depleted uranium. The main concern is kidney toxicity. So as you see here, the reviews indicate that the kidneys were the main target organ for causing long-term depleted uranium exposures. And with this one, this kind of reminds me of the so certain isotopes have an affinity to certain parts of the body. There's this very, very famous saying, if you have been alive long enough, and it talks about how you drink enough milk as a kid, and your bones will become stronger, because the calcium concentration in milk, right? Until I got in this field, I really was like, why does it make your bones stronger? Like, why does calcium do that? And how does calcium know to go to your bone? And that's when I kind of figured out, like, affinity. So much like calcium has an affinity to bone, there are other isotopes that have that same affinity as well. One notable one that I worked around, which is strontium, yttrium-90, that also has a high affinity to bone. Also, excuse me. Um, there's also iodine 131 that has an affinity to the thyroid gland, so it really likes that thyroid gland. And then there's some other ones like cobalt 60, um, and then there's some others that they have a they have a like for certain um, organs in the body. So, and it's all from a chemical perspective. So it's something about how the chemical or how the substance is made and it attaches to certain parts of the body. It's like the makeup of the substance tells the isotope where to go. So that's pretty cool. You know, so let's go on here. So these are some key takeaways from depleted uranium. So less radioactive than natural uranium because it's depleted. Um, Main thing we worry about is toxicity. Not radiation, but radiation is something that can be a factor if you're looking at prolonged exposure. And something else I wanted to note, the main routes of exposure that are concerning are inhalation, ingestion, and wound contamination. Um, and I kind of talked about um, when these bombs are detonated at altitude and they are carried throughout the wind, right? That's where you can kind of get that. Um, well, that's how that would be a way that you could, ingest or inhale um, radioactive substances. Now, depleted uranium is still radioactive, but it's not enough. It's the amount of uranium 238 is less than 1%. So there's still some concern, but not enough. So kidney damage is the primary documented health concern, and there's no conclusive evidence that links this depleted uranium exposure to cancer or birth defects. Risk depends on dose, duration, and I can't see that. Okay, so that's the end of the presentation. Thank you for taking the time to listen to it, and please let me know if there's anything I can do to become a better presenter of information. Public speaking is not my strong suit here, so thank you for taking the time, and have a great day.